Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Welcome to all the learners. Now we have studied in first module that how the law has evolved over a period of time, how the law has shaped up the development of electricity sector both at the pre-independence stage as well as at the post-independence stage. Now we will learn certain important ideas and important areas which influences the growth of power market and also shapes up the law and policy measures. And after this we will be understanding the overview of important provisions of the law dealing with electricity. So, today we will be studying on energy security. Energy security is an important point of deliberation for all the learners, practitioners working in the area of energy law. Energy, right from the beginning of human civilization, played a significant role in guaranteeing better living to human beings. And therefore, it is not an exaggeration to say that energy use and the very learning to make better of that energy use has immensely contributed in making the life better and purposeful. So, initially the whole discussion started on, or the whole experimentation started on, that what kind of energies, what kind of sources which shall be exploited for generating energy. And as we know very well that largely divided into two kind of sources, primary and secondary. In the secondary, where the processing is required to convert the fuel into usable product. For example, thermal electricity, for electricity from thermal sources, or electricity from hydropower plants. So, in the beginning, the very foundational framework laid down on the basis of conventional sources of energy, I would say. Necessary technological developments took place, that how the sources such as coal, lignite, gas, oil can be used for generating electricity. But over a period of time, it has been experienced that these sources are also adversely affecting the environment. they are causing degradation, and thus a need was felt to explore renewable sources of energy. And therefore, any talk on energy security must be taken up, the discourse must be designed, discourse must be framed, that how effectively we can and efficiently we can switch to renewables. And that is what the agenda of energy security is getting driven these days, because it is not only about pulling in sources for driving the economic growth. It is not only about ensuring the availability of electricity for either upscaling the manufacturing units or just to ensure the supply of electricity to the industry. It is also connected with human needs. In today's context, you cannot imagine educational institution being run without electricity, hospital being run without electricity. Many such social upliftment connected with the availability of electricity, and that is why energy security must deal with these issues. Earlier, there was an understanding that when you talk about energy security, it is all about minimizing the dependency on the import of oil and gas, that how as a country you can channelize the sources so that there shall be minimal import. The reason being that the resources from the country has to pay for oil and gas which is being imported from other nations. So, how to minimize it so that foreign exchange cannot be spent on such resources. But then the understanding of energy security has witnessed a paradigm shift, I would say, largely because of the technological innovation making the conventional fuel better in terms of calorific value, in terms of lessening the damaging effect on the environment, and on the other hand technological upscaling in the area of renewables, so that both the sources can become competitive. So, energy security in present context is not only about how you are reducing the dependency on the import, it is more also about how you are tapping resources which are domestically available. So, there is a need of giving a comprehensive policy overview on energy security. And if there is insecurity, then obviously it would have direct impact on the trajectory of growth. If industries are not getting reliable and quality supply, it will ultimately cost very heavily on the nation, and it also connects with the welfare of the consumer, because as a consumer one expects to get a quality supply and uninterrupted supply. So, unless and until all resources are being tapped, it is very difficult to attain that security, it is very difficult to attain that sort of independence which is needed for developing this market. Now, before I move to the Indian position, I want to highlight on the very aspect of energy security being dealt at the global level. Sustainable development goal is a collective effort on the part of all the countries to make the planet better for human beings, and therefore a kind of blind drive towards development is to be avoided, and that drive for the development must be considered. That drive towards the development must keep the welfare of human beings at the core, and this is a kind of commitment which the nations together they have taken for the larger welfare of mankind, I would say. Prior to this, there was Millennium Development Goal, which could not ensure the targeted result because of inherent deficiency of considering the matter of right as a matter of charity. I would that what is supposed to be considered to be a matter of right has been given a sort of welfare flavor. Now, there is an improvement from Millennium Development Goal, that whatever lacunas were there, whatever shortcomings were there, now in Sustainable Development Goal it has been achieved. It has been anchored. The main theme is human right, that how the human rights need to be kept at the core of any talk on development. So, Sustainable Development Goal gives a sort of direction to the nations, that in your developmental plan you do not only think about economic growth, but that same must also be taken up considering the rights of individual, that how economic growth can further the rights of the individual, and that is what is been suggested by laying down the operational principles under the SDGs. Now, in this sustainable goal, you would find that energy features very prominently. Goal number 7 of Sustainable Development Goal says that by 2030 there shall be universal access to affordable, reliable and modern energy services, and it uses a broader term, energy services, meaning thereby does not confine only to the availability of electricity for the purpose of industry, for the purpose of agriculture purpose. It goes beyond, where it is forecasting that how it can be made available for other purposes also, so that country or individual minimizes its dependency on conventional fuel. It also says that increase substantially the share of renewable energy in the global energy mix. Still date what we find is that the larger share is of coal based electricity, and which is certainly not very sustainable, because it causes pollution, and economic growth with environmental degradation does not have a very meaningful outcome for the society. And that's why what it says is that what we need to work on is also along with this energy efficiency. So, it is about the consumption, but it is also about the quality availability of electricity. And because it requires sort of technological intervention, and every country is not in a position to invest to get that technical know-how, very realistically 2030 suggests that the answer of this is international cooperation. That the one who have already gained sufficient knowledge, they must pass it on to those countries which are not having enough resources to invest. Because pollution in one region and cleaner environment in another region ultimately is not going to make the planet safe. The whole planet has to be considered as one unit for the purpose of clean energy drive. And that is why international cooperation is a remarkable feature in SDG. Now, India has its own commitment. We know very well that the government of India has made the commitment to generate electricity through renewables up to 175 gigawatt by 2022. In that, substantial portion is solar. And in this you find that the energy intensity of GDP have decreased by more than 20% over the past decade. So, in a way India is working in the direction so that cleaner energy will have a larger role to play in time to come. And the same is case with the energy efficiency. You must have heard a drive of the government of India and individual state governments also, where they are encouraging people to switch to LED bulbs, LED tube lights. Now, these drives, they attain a very larger objective. They make the use of energy in a very efficient way. When you look at how energy security has been conceived in India, there is a 2016 integrated energy policy, that is what we look at, where it says that it is something which is so fundamental to lead a meaningful life, and that is why it says supply of lifeline energy to all citizens irrespective of their ability to pay. And that is why, if you can recall, I was saying this in earlier sessions, that electricity as a product must not be seen only for the purpose of industrial growth or economic growth. It has much larger target to achieve, and that is why it categorically says it should be available to all, and to all at the affordable prices. And that is the reason why it says that how to make it affordable only when you increase the competitiveness in the market. So, that is why it says that let the demand be put up in such a way so that more and more players can come in the market and they can make the power market competitive, which will certainly help the consumer. And this is also been targeted considering the exploitation of all the resources for the production of electricity, for the generation of electricity. So, it has been suggested that let there be exploration of all the sources, not only the conventional one which has been set up in early part of the last century, I would say, and then it graduated after gaining independence. So, what is important is that let there be a reasonable pricing, and that is to be looked into, that is to be based on how the market is growing, what is the pattern of the use by the consumer, how market is facilitating the growth, because all these are important for achieving energy security. If market facilitates the growth of renewable, then there would be investor interested to come forward and bring out path breaking technology in the sector. So, all these are interconnected. It is important to supply electricity to all. At the same time, it should be seen that it is reasonable, at reasonable cost. Reasonable cost is possible when you look at the competition, and competition will come in only when you have investor friendly regime, and this is what is needed for securing sustainability in this sector. Now, when you look at India, we are progressing very well on the economic front, and one of the reasons for doing well is the growth in economy, that annual growth has been somewhere in 7 to 8%. Obviously, during COVID it has come down, but then I am discounting this period because of unprecedented situation. Overall, when you look at the economic growth of India, you would find that it is in the range of 8 to 9%. And when you look at the related statistics, you also get the conviction in a sense that electricity consumption, when you look at the electricity market, the way it has been growing, it is being compared to China or United States. So, one factor is certainly population, because we have a large population, we are looking at it in that way, that larger the population, higher the demand of electricity. Along with that, there is also a factor of industrial growth, and that is why you find that annually the installed capacity is growing in the range of 6%. And then the very agenda of creating one grid for the entire country is also been fulfilled. We will study more about grid in later classes. But then the establishment of national grid conveys this very meaning, conveys this very plan, that the region which is not having enough generating units, they can very well get the electricity from this surplus region, the region from where the electricity is being generated in surplus. and this would certainly minimize the dependency also on oil and gas. So, if we have a well integrated network, then transferring electricity to one region, from one region to another region, will be very convenient. And when you look at the consumption pattern, you would find that the industrial and service sectors, they are consuming highest in the country. Now, on energy security, you would find that the 2003 Act also made in necessary changes in order to make the country lesser dependent on the import, and also to promote the exploitation of the renewables for the production of electricity. So, necessary structural institutional reform has been given a legal status under 2003 Act. And what you find that in order to make a pathway that how the whole energy policy should get governed, how we can achieve energy security, because there are multiple sources. Central Electricity Authority has been suggested to make the plan for that same, so that there shall be a sort of integrated approach. Integrated approach because of the very fact that electricity as a subject falls in both centre and the state's jurisdiction, because it is there in the concurrent list of the Constitution. And in this regard, regulatory bodies are also going to play a very phenomenal role, because they do have a role to communicate a language of confidence to the investor, and that is possible only when fairness becomes, justness becomes, transparency becomes driving theme of the game. And regulatory bodies are interested with this task, that tariff formulation, for example, must be done in a very fair way. And we have studied that how 2003 Act formally institutionalized unbundling of the vertical structure which was prevailing on generation, transmission and distribution segment. So, reform in the market is also taking us towards energy security. Now, there are two kinds of insecurities what you find in this sector. One is system insecurity, where even if we have good power system in place, the infrastructure is not such where the generated electricity is reaching to the consumer. So, there is an issue of infrastructural deficiency with regard to transferring electricity. That is one. So, there is absence of electricity when there is peak demand. And second one is the supply insecurity, where even if there is a generation, it is not being transferred, maybe because of the poor infrastructural framework which is there, infrastructural, establishment which is there at the transmission end or at the generation segment. So, these are two important insecurities. One, where there is some deficiency in the system, demand is there, but then supply is not there. Second is, we do have installed capacity, but then the generating units are not able to make good use of it because of the absence of proper network, and that is also the reason of technical and commercial losses, which is very, very high when you compare with global standards in India. So, when you look at the significance of energy security, you find that to achieve this is important if we have to globally compete with others. We have to minimize our dependency on these resources which we are getting from outside. Then necessary skill is needed. Necessary skill on the technical side, necessary innovation is needed. And any investment on this will have a direct bearing on generation of employment for the population. And then energy security is also needed to expand the services in other sectors. For example, the government of India is advocating for electric vehicles in a big way. In a way, what is happening is that the government of India, through its policy, through its planning, minimizing the role, minimizing the use of crude oil in the transport sector. But then success would be achieved only when there is sufficient investment happen, and which needed a sort of sectoral integration. So, if you want electricity to be the fuel for our transport, we need to work on the infrastructure accordingly. We need to plan tapping of the resources in a very effective manner. There are two approaches what you find of this, for energy security. One is the long term, the other is the short term. Long term is about focusing on the investment to supply energy in line with how the economic progress is happening in the country. But then, as I said, this must not be at the cost of degrading the environment. If we are having enough electricity supply, but then that supply is going only for our medical care, only for supplying in the hospital, because we are getting more and more patients because of air pollution, water pollution and all, then that is really not serving any purpose for the society. So, it is important that enough electricity should be produced, required amount is to be produced, it is to be generated, but then that must be from cleaner sources, so that there should not be any cascading effect. And the short term is about ensuring a sort of supply demand balance. Right now in India, you would find largely it is going by the supply factor. There is a need to build a robust demand side management for the growth of this industry. So, we need to keep in this mind long term and short term approaches for energy security. Thank you very much.